Hi, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Goats and Cookies. I'm Kevin McCall, your host, and we're going to be talking today about constitutionalism and journalism. My co-hosts are Lucian Friel and, Zach, and we're going to go through and introduce ourselves really quick, talk about who we are, and then we'll start on with our topics of the day. If you want to start us off, Lou, go ahead and introduce yourself and just let us know a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Lucian Friel. There was no need for a pause there. I'm one of one. If you look up Lucian Friel, that you're getting what you get, man. Uh, yeah, I am a former combat correspondent, a Marine veteran. I served from 2003 to 2007, writing stories, taking pictures, winning hearts and minds, and also acting as a liaison to civilian media as well, anytime they would come out. Currently, after the Marine Corps, I earned my bachelor's and master's degrees in integrated communications, which includes everything from advertising, marketing to public relations, and a little bit of journalism. I haven't been in journalism much recently, but I've still been writing here and there for the organization that I work for. And yeah, I'm super excited to be here. This has been in the works for a little bit, and I am gung ho and ready to go.
Thanks,
I'm
Lou.
Zach. I'm going to echo kind of the happy to be here. I'm like that JV kid that got pulled up to the varsity team and is just happy to be a part of everything and feels a part of the team. Um, but I am from North Carolina. I am a high school history teacher. I have no background in the military outside of being a passionate historian and collector and preserver of Marine Corps artifacts and oral history. That has been a passion of mine for the last 6 years in a journey that has led me to meet both of the gentlemen you see sitting in front of me. Gentlemen's used loosely, but that's for you to decide later. Um, but with my background, I have a background in education with a history degree that led me to teach at the secondary level. And then a couple of years ago, I got a master's degree in history. And for some reason, Kevin has deemed me a semi-decent expert on some of what we're going to talk about today. And I just absolutely love being able to have a platform like this to where we can have a roundabout session of talking about our passions, our interests, our nerdiness, and what makes us unique, but also bringing in facts and understanding the evolving world around us when it comes to what we're going to talk about today.
I'm Kevin McCall. I'm from a tiny town called Piedmont, South Carolina, and I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17 years old. It was I think three months after 9/11. I went to boot camp, and I was in until December of 2011, January of 2001 until December of 2011 when I medically retired after being wounded in combat. And afterward, I went to college. I transferred to SDSU, got my BSME, mechanical engineering bachelor, and started my own business from there. I just worked as a mechanic ever since. I actually met Zach on Reddit of all places, which is kind of a cesspool. I'm glad that we were able to connect on there and put all of this together. Um, you kind of sell yourself short. It's this is all because of you. I mean, I'm gonna credit you with it. This wouldn't be happening if you had never contacted me. And I'm really happy that I was able to reconnect with Lou as well. We hadn't seen each other since 2005, and I think we maybe talked once on Facebook Messenger like 2 years ago or a year ago. I think I was in Philadelphia and I just messaged you on a whim. Anyway, yeah, so we have a really good rapport between the three of us. We've been doing a video series that is Zach's brainchild, where he interviews a lot of Vietnam veterans on from, and a lot of them have been combat photographers and combat correspondents, as Lou is. And all of this just kind of fell into place, and I couldn't be more grateful to Zach for his hard work and diligence in putting all of this together. So let's get started. Let's move on into our topics. The first topic is constitutionalism, what it means to us. How we ourselves see ourselves as constitutionalists, and what we mean to do about it. So the things I would really like to get into are the rule of law with the limitation of power and how that applies currently, we can be a little more abstract about it if you don't want to go into great detail. But and then as far as the separation of powers with checks and balances, and constitutionalism and the protection of our rights as American citizens and as veterans, having sworn an oath to the Constitution, what that means to us and how we feel about everything that's happening in our country, everything that could happen in our country, everything that has happened in our country. And yeah, so if one of you guys would like to volunteer to go first, I would really appreciate it.
Well, I'll kick it off with, what is constitutionalism? I've been teaching government classes, and college level government classes for the last 9 years. And, the Constitution, its roots go back to like 1276 or so with like the Magna Carta,
Mhm.
which is the first known document in English history that truly does try to limit the power of a king and an authority figure. And so, you flash forward 500 years post-American Revolution, the Articles of Confederation failed. We need a working document that can govern this country, but that can also limit and powers. We don't want to go back to this concept of a monarchy that we've just came from. And so constitutionalism, and the Constitution is born, a document that is technically considered a living document because it can be edited or addendum with an amendment throughout its legacy. And for our viewers out there, I hope all of you know how many amendments we have, but it's not many. If you think about the course of the history of the United States, only 27. The Bill of Rights has 10. We've only added 17 amendments since the incorporation of the Bill of Rights, but we've proposed over 10,000 amendments in the United States. The two longest amendments took over 200 years, if you're going to classify it that, before they finally got ratified by enough states. And we can come back to that at a later point. But the beautiful thing, about the Constitution is that when it's enforced, it is a wonderful document. It protects my rights as a citizen of the United States. It protects your rights as veterans of the United States and as current serving members of the military. It gives us untouched and untold freedoms that, in technicality, no one else around the world is supposed to have, but it gives us this pride as Americans, for what we can do and carry ourselves in this country as patriots, as constitutionalists, as free men and women of this society. And this wonderful concept is that it's a government of laws, not of men, where law applies to all, regardless of rank, regardless of status in the military, regardless of political affiliation, all are the same. And, we kind of get to this concept of, and I've been talking with students of mine about this, is that the Constitution is great when it's enforced. And so, kids of mine are like, well, what does that mean? And it's like, well, when you have this system, like you mentioned, of checks and balances only work when our three branches of government, when our Congress, when our officials, when our state government via federalism is actually trying to enforce that. And that's a conversation for later. Blue, chime in anytime you want there.
Yeah, I can sort of try to take the veteran perspective of it. I mean, when we swear in, I mean, I'll be honest. When I was in high school, I mean, I wasn't really taught the Constitution very well. That's I don't want to say that's bad on my teachers, but it's definitely bad on the system that they're not teaching that as well as they should be. At least I hope they are now. It sounds like Zach, your school system, takes care of that, or you are working on that. So you're definitely arming your students with the knowledge that they need to protect themselves. Because if you don't know your rights, if you don't know, the things uh, that protect you, then you're liable to get walked all over by people and by the government. And so I think for the veteran perspective, supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States literally means that against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So anybody that would threaten our way of life in that sense, anyone that would try to, stomp on any one of the amendments of the Constitution, it's on us as members of the military who swore an oath to protect and defend it to step up when needed. And stepping up when needed can be as simple as calling it out and being a voice, which I hope we're going to give a platform for people to do here if they feel the need to do that. And so, yeah, for me, that's kind of what the Constitution means to me. And yeah, I'll pass it off to Kevin on that.
All right. That was man, you guys both gave really great, thorough answers. I really appreciate that. Well thought through. You know, I'm really passionate about the Constitution. When people ask me what my political position is or my political party, I always say just constitutionalist. I know they always look at me like I'm an idiot, but whatever. I am a constitutionalist. What is in the Constitution is what is. So as far as the rule of law, that is for us. We need to keep ourselves in check, but more importantly, the limitation of power. We don't need a king. We don't need people coming down and controlling us, taking advantage of us as citizens, taking advantage of our taxation, taking advantage of our rights, taking advantage of us as human beings. And that is the limitation of power. The Constitution exists to protect us as citizens from the government. It exists. I mean, there's really not a lot. I mean, we have the Bill of Rights, we have our state and federal laws, but honestly, what it comes down to is the Constitution protects us as citizens from a tyrannical government. The Second Amendment says it verbatim. There's a lot in there that protects us as people. So the separation of powers and the checks and balances that I brought up earlier, I'll say the separation of powers is extremely important to me because when we have someone who controls every single branch of the government, it's dangerous. It's happened numerous times. It's happened whether it's Democrats, whether it's Republicans. I think it was back in 2012. It was they had the House, the Senate, and the administration. It was all Democrats. Um, I think that should be avoided at all costs, but I also think a lot of sense should be, brought into the entire debate. And I think that's kind of been left to the wayside. As far as the protection of our rights go, that is the Constitution. It protects you and me and keeps us safe from government overreach. I'll say that because I have a lot I could say on it, but I don't want to. I don't want to be too out there with it just yet. I don't want to be a radical just yet. But as far as the Constitution goes, I will support and defend it with my life. Have argued with people on the right side, on the left side of the aisle about the Constitution. If they want to go against the Constitution, they need to do it the right way with legislation. Go draft a bill. You want to do something, go draft a bill. That is exactly how it should be. That's how it's supposed to be. That's how our founding fathers meant it to be. Again, I can't stress it enough. That is, the Constitution is meant to protect us. Anyone serving in the military should know that they are not serving our country. They are not serving a flag. They're not serving a president. That's your chain of command. That's a piece of cloth. You are serving the United States citizens. You are serving the Constitution of the United States. You are there and you give that oath to support the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. You say that for a reason. It's not because we can just trust each other and move forward and just love one another and believe that we all have each other's best interests at heart. It's because time and time again it's been proven that those that have power over others never have anyone's best interests at heart except for themselves. Um, I know this is the more controversial of the three answers that we're having here, but like I said, I am a radical. You can see where I stand. I'm not ashamed to bring out my full name here, and I'm not against debating and answering questions if anyone has them. But I am a constitutionalist. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a democratic socialist. I'm not a socialist. I am a constitutionalist. Constitutionalism means the world to me, and that's why it was one of the two topics for our first episode. I couldn't think of a better a better topic to bring up, and I think the First Amendment is one of the most important amendments to the Constitution. As Zach said, it's constantly changing. It's a morphing existence as it is. That's what amend means. It means to change. You can change it. You can do it the right way. There is a legal process to doing it. Executive orders and storming the Capitol aren't exactly the constitutional way to make changes. But yeah, it's I'm sure you guys have a lot to say from what I when I do
Well,
my ramblings. So yeah, go for it.
you mentioned the oath that you both swore to the Constitution. I've never had to swear that oath. As an educator, that is not a requirement for us in the classroom. And so I've never been put in those shoes. However, I analyze that oath all the time. When I'm not teaching classes on government, I actually teach a class that is solely dedicated to understanding the Holocaust. And it is a college level class that I have created myself. I created it in 2018. And the beautiful thing about the class, to talk about my nerdiness, is that each time I teach the class, and I'm a nerd, you both know this, I learn new information about the Holocaust each time I go down into this class, and that's awesome to me. However, um, back to the constitutional oath. I always compare the oath that our congressmen and women, politicians, and our military men and women swear to the Constitution, to that German citizens and anybody that was working as a educator, lawyer, doctor, any civil servant within the Nazi political regime by the summer of 1933 and in the German military, that the oaths that they had to swear. And the oath that they were swearing was not to a Weimar Constitution. It was not necessarily to the German people. It was to one individual. And it was literally written in there, Adolf Hitler. And I compare that to, and I turn it into a discussion question for my class of, what differences do you notice here? How does the Constitution of the United States of America show democracy, show this concept of this, in many ways, this nobility that, you are not swearing allegiance to a party, to a leader. It's to the people, regardless of political faction, religious beliefs, gender affiliation, whether they support abortion or immigration, you swear it to this country compared to a singular individual. And I always tell my students, though, that the sad reality is that, you take June 1933 and you go back a year to June 1932. And that is how quickly Weimar Germany does go from a state of democracy to an authoritarian dictatorship. And, I always tell my students that prior to 1938, with open violence, what the Nazis did in 1933, outside of the Reichstag fire, for those of you that know anything about the history there, their laws they passed were legal. It was Jim Crow in Germany against German Jewish citizens, homosexuals, and others. But everything that happened was done through a legal process because the Nazi government or Nazi party was able to control the federal and the state government solely by targeting their political enemies through fear and propaganda. And I tell my students that, realistically, that democracy is never safe when you have like-minded individuals who want total power coming into control. And when they get that control, what's to stop them from passing laws that do impact people that are different than they are? And that's why I bring up the argument of, checks and balances. Checks and balances only work when one part of the government is willing to check the other for that balance. But what happens when all three branches of the government are under the same party control? Is it more about the Constitution, or do we now get into the realm of party loyalty and party goals? And does checks and balances and democracy begin to tilt in the way of authoritarian government under the guise of democracy?
Absolutely. And those were all excellent points. One question I would have for you as a, with your credentials would be, can a country truly have constitutionalism without judicial independence? What do you think about that?
Man.
Sorry to blindside you.
Hey, that's okay
I
though,
should have said that to you beforehand.
No, don't like that's the way that this is gonna have to go, man.
Yeah.
Like that was a damn good question. I was not ready for that. Um, I think that it could in many ways. Think about our Supreme Court right now.
Mhm.
9 members. How do they get there?
They
Anybody?
were all yeah, they were all appointed.
Okay, appointed, nominated by the president, appointed by
Hmm.
the Senate through a vote there. But are the judges in, and I would have to do a further deep dive into our judicial branch and our Supreme Court. But are our judges of the last, let's say, 60 years put into that position because of their background as a judge, or is it party affiliation and some of their background working in the
Yeah.
legal system? And and I tell my students, as we come up to issues that get brought up to the Supreme Court, in many ways in modern times, it's no longer the rights of the American citizen that matter with the Supreme Court. It's party affiliation. Well, what is the Republican Party's goal? What is the Democratic Party's goal? Not let's remove party from it. Let's just analyze, does this issue impact American citizens' lives positively or negatively? And if it's positively, great, let's keep it. If it's negatively, how can we turn this issue into a positive impact on American citizens? So, in many ways, um, I do wish that we would remove the political stigma with the Supreme Court or even add in term limits for God's sakes. Because our Supreme Court can serve for life. And that's another fact to consider. If you get appointed as a judge in your 40s, you could technically serve for 60 years. You could have
Yeah.
someone as a teenager that was appointed when your grandparents were teenagers that are making decisions on your life. That's three generational differences there where views are constantly changing. And in many ways, it's alarming to think that a president from, six, seven different presidencies can have a member of the Supreme Court that's still on there that they appointed when America is consistently evolving, the people are evolving.
Mhm.
So with our Supreme Court, I always tell my students, 535 during an election year, 538 congressmen and women determine through a system, technically, give or take there, who becomes president of the United States. But in terms of power and rights with the Constitution, 9 people appointed by their political affiliation determine what is constitutional and what is not. And when you have a constitutional issue that is brought to the Supreme Court, will that Supreme Court go against the wishes of the president of that party for party loyalty? Is that the point that we have got to in America today? And would we be having this conversation 30 years ago? Because I was a kid in the 90s and early 2000s. I don't recall a lot of the political strife, the political wavelengths of the Bush Gore era, of the Bush John McCain era prior to Barack Obama on the onset. I don't remember a lot of that because I didn't pay attention. But has America always been this way and we just didn't pay that much attention to it, or is it getting more attention now due to social media and a larger presence that is able to give a voice?
No, it's really good points all around. Lou, do you have anything to add to that, or are you ready for the next question?
I mean, I think, and this is going to, hopefully not opening up a whole new can of worms,
Hell yeah, Lou, do it.
Do it, do it, do
but
it.
I think that just on what you were, that last sort of up in the air question, Zach, of has it always been this way or is it getting worse? I think it is getting worse. I mean, obviously, I haven't been around but 40 years, and as far as like cognitive of the government, probably only about 22 of those years, have I really been thinking about it or paying attention to it. But I mean, one thing that's blatantly obvious is money in politics. And I think money rules everything else. Everyone can talk about their morals and their ideologies and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, what I feel is influencing our politics is the money, right? So, and it all trickles back to it because if we're talking about appointing judges on the Supreme Court to rule in favor of one party's views or another, well, one party's views are really the views of their donors, aren't they? Right? Because they got elected, they got chosen, not, I mean, yes, by the people. But the only reason they were able to get in front of the people is because they had the money to do it. And how do they get the money to do it? Big corporations, PACs, all these different people with all these different
Mhm.
interests. And it's tough for me to think or to take a politician serious that's like, yeah, I took, $3 million from this corporation, but I think on my own. I don't owe them
Mhm.
anything. Oh, you don't? Okay. Well, we'll see if you get reelected then. Let's see if that $3 million comes back at you. And so, I think that's when we talk about like maybe threats to democracy and threats to the Constitution. That's to me, money in politics is one of the biggest. And I hate to be the one that's like, oh, well, both sides are guilty of it, but they are. That's the fact of it.
Yeah.
You can look it up. It's campaign finance on any
Citizens
politician.
United versus FEC. I hate that court case.
Yeah, and think about how that got passed, right? Like, and So yeah, you can. I mean, you can look online, go to campaign finance, and look at your favorite politicians. See who has. I mean, I hate to say it, but bought and paid for them. You
Yeah.
know, here I'll just say it. In Virginia, I mean, one of the biggest corporations is an energy company. We'll say the name, but pretty sure everyone knows it because they essentially have a monopoly on the energy business, and they give money to both parties. They're not one way or another. Their interests are their own company's interests, and that's no fault to them. I mean, that's every company, right? That's capitalism, right? Their interests are the company's interests and the company's growth and the company's um, profits. And so they're going to support the politicians that they can get in that will
Mm,
favor them, right?
absolutely.
Otherwise, why would you give a politician money?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I have a cousin who's completely MAGA, and I mean like 100% devoted. I use that word devoted for a reason. He had an interesting idea, and this was last year before the inauguration. He said that he believes all politicians, when elected to official office, should have every bit of their finances put into a public trust that is transparent and anyone can look at any point in time. This is someone who is MAGA saying this, by the way. So, yeah, I mean, go figure the irony here, but it's really a great idea. I thought it was when he said it, I was like, wow, you know, that's really profound. And he himself, he's in finance. He knows what he's talking about for the most part, except for he calls Mamdani a communist. That kind of bothers me. But you know, whether you support him or not, the guy's not a communist. But that's neither here nor there. One thing I used to say, kind of to touch on what you were speaking about a minute ago, was I used to always say one side of the aisle wants to sell us to the rich, and one side of the aisle wants to sell us to the corporations. And now I don't know which one's better. It's gotten to a point where it's like, okay, I need to capitulate one way or the other. There's no checks or balances. Things are so up in the air. I really don't know where to lie my allegiances here and which politicians. The politicians I hated 2 years ago, I'm actually supporting now, and it makes no sense to me whatsoever. And it's a mess. The checks and balances are not there. The accountability is not there. And it's a really dangerous situation. We have been in this situation before, but I don't think they weren't able to rein themselves in to a point. You know, we've had the government shut down plenty of times before, never this long. A lot of those times were when I was serving in the military, and I was worried about if my next paycheck was going to show up. It did, luckily. Uh, right now, I'm worried about if are they going to cancel my pension for being retired from the Marine Corps? You know, like who knows? To tie all of this back to the Constitution, um, the relationship between constitutionalism and the protection of our fundamental rights cannot be stressed enough. I think this is the message that I really want to spread. I think that we need to tell people that we are protecting ourselves by supporting the Constitution. I don't think it should be muddled or ambiguous. I think it should be a very direct point.
Well, to piggyback off of both of you said, Lou, you did brought up a great point about talking about, an organization in Virginia and a company that is well known or for contributing to politicians. And I just did a quick search while you mentioned that and pulled up one of North Carolina's representatives. And for people who will say that I am always a liberal supporting Democrats, I'm going to talk about Don Davis, who is a Democratic congressman from the first district of North Carolina. His top contributor that has given him $537,000 is American Israel Public Affairs Committee, that is a pro-Israel committee that stands for those that stand for Israel. And the cool thing about this website, opensecrets.org, for those that don't know about it, you can look up any politician in the United States, and you can see who their top contributors are. And for those that are like, well, my politician would never do that. Well, I hate to break it to you, you're wrongfully informed. You're an idiot. I'm just going to be bluntly with it. Our politicians will tell us one thing, and then immediately when they get there, it is the checks that determine how they vote. It does not matter political affiliation realistically when it comes down to it. For the most part, it's which company, which corporation, which super PAC, which lobbyist group gave me the fattest check most recently that's going to determine how I vote. And if you don't,
Mhm.
there's and I might not have any evidence to prove this, but if you voted against the money that you've been given, you're going to find yourself out of Congress quicker than you got there. Blackmail allegations, there will be something drawn up to find a yes man there. And I tell my students this in the class that I teach. And someone's going to be like, find the school this man teaches at, report him for teaching anti-American conspiracy theories. This is elite democracy 101. And it's a concept of a form of democracy where the elite want power and control. Who has the ability right now in America to get to Washington, D.C.? It can't be me. It can't be Kevin, realistically. It can't be Lou. The three of us, we do have great ideas. And I think that we would do a damn good job of putting this country on the track it needs to be. However, what do we not have? We don't have millions of dollars sitting around that we can run ads with, that we can get our name out with. And three, I like to think that three of us have a moral compass, even though I joke with my students that I don't, that we wouldn't be bought by money, that would be there trying to do things for the right reason because the Constitution is the reason that three of us are realistically doing this today. And I think that your average American citizen, one, is not educated enough on American politics, two, or who they're voting for, but realistically, three, how the system works now. This is not 1786 now, where we've just fought a revolution 10 years ago. This concept of freedom is brand new. We're voting for people that we might believe in, even though the people being voted on in 1789, 90, and henceforth were wealthy individuals. The system has changed so much over the last 200 years, and I'm afraid it's not changed for the better.
Absolutely. Man, that was solid. Thank you for that.
I don't
Lou,
know
Lou.
whichever one of you thinks that I'm smart, but you're an idiot. But Lou, add on to this, man. This is cool.
Yeah, on the, I think for people that are gonna, search and, maybe hear that and then search, their favorite politician or even just the politicians that are directly connected to them, whether that's in their district, for the state, whether that's Congress, whether that's their senators, you'll, I don't want to say be surprised, but you'll be disappointed a lot of the
Yeah.
time
You
of
know,
not just who they're taking from, but how much money is being. So on that topic, we had a state senate. Uh, excuse me. Actually, it wasn't even a state senate. It was a state delegate uh, campaign that literally ran for both candidates. Cost $2 million for a state delegate. I don't know if you all know what state delegates make, but
yeah.
it's like I think $1,300 a month, maybe something like that. I could be wrong on that. Maybe they might have given themselves a raise since then, but but yeah, that just kind of shows like how far down it's gotten and how much money is being spent just on a state delegate race. It's like crazy.
Mm.
Nothing against state delegates, but I mean, as far as the totem pole of politicians, they're at the lower end.
I'll
Well,
throw this out there.
oh, go ahead,
So,
Kevin.
yeah, I'm really sorry. This is kind of anecdotal, but when I was in the Marines, there's a lot of downtime. I think everyone that's been in the military knows it's a hurry up and wait type situation. And in those wait situations, we play a lot of mental games, and we play the what if game a lot. And there's different versions of the what if game, and there's the how much would it cost for you to do game. I'll say we had some pretty colorful how much would it cost you to do X? Like how much would it cost you to um everyone had a price.
Yep.
Every single person had a price. Your politicians have a price. They all have a price. When you're talking theoretically, when you're talking about your morals and when it doesn't matter, you can always say like, hey, I'm impervious to bribes. I'm impervious to greed. Money's not going to change my mind. Fuck that. We live in capitalism,
Nope.
guys. Like, money is everything. They say money can't buy you love. Money can buy you love. Money can buy you happiness. Money can buy you fucking anything that you want in this country. Money can buy your freedom after you murder your wife. I watched it in sixth grade on TV at school. You know what I'm saying? Money can get you out of anything that you want. Money can get you the presidency.
100%. And to echo off of that, and then I'll flip this to either of you, is you made the joke, but it also wasn't a joke. I think the last time, or maybe the three of us were together, of that for a second, when you look at the numbers of what ICE is offering to pay people, it's like
Hmm.
for a split second, it's like six figures, college debt paid off, sounds really nice. But you're right though, I know for a fact I have a price, and that's sad. I like to think that I'm a good person all around, but realistically, at the end of the day, if somebody from Washington, D.C. said, "Hey, here's a blank check for you to just, we need you to do X, Y, and Z. These are the people that are going to support you. All we need you to do is vote in favor of these bills that are coming up related to it. But here's a blank check." And, considering my life as a teacher, oh, I take that. And I know that's so heartbreaking to say, and some people that are going to watch this are going to be like, well, you're un-American. Am I though? Put yourself in that situation when you were given that opportunity. Think about these politicians. And Kevin brings up a great point of the presidency, and it goes back to Congress too. When you think about the average American, we are not millionaires. The average American income household is like what, 250, $275,000, maybe even less in 2025. Probably less realistically, I think, if I'm not mistaken. When's the last time we had a president come from a walk of life that was an average middle class income American? When's the last time we had a congressman or woman get to Washington, D.C. with the intensive purposes of doing what they are supposed to do per the Constitution, per their constituents that voted for them? And gerrymandering's another point for later. When's the last time that actually happened where people weren't getting in those positions because they were paid to be there?
We're way past the point where the French Revolution happened. I mean, the wealth disparity, the wage gap that existed in the French Revolution, we're way past that. And they were beheading motherfuckers like right and left. Like the only thing that keeps us is in the late 1980s, credit scores were invented. We are slaves to our credit scores.
Amen
We
to
are,
that.
I mean, everything we do is like, can I buy a house? Can I buy a car? Can I get a phone plan? Can I do this? Can I do that? And it all comes down to that one slave number, that three-digit number that you want to be starting with eight. You really want it to start with eight, but it always starts with a fucking six. There's nothing you can do about it. I bought a house when I had a 742. That shit dropped to 620 right away, and it never got back up to 720 or 740. I'm sorry. It's just we're slaves to it, and no one's willing to risk a French Revolution right now because they're either too comfortable or they're too in debt. What if we lose? What if, it's that what if game that we played in the Marine Corps. Yeah, it's real life though. It really is. And it's scary as fuck to approach this in that way.
The median household income, by the way, is so the median income household is $83,730.
I didn't think it was near 200,000.
Man, I
When
gotta
you
do
said
some
that, I was like,
economic
Ugh.
reading. Yeah,
I
I'm
was
glad
like,
you
no
pulled
way,
that
it's
up,
that.
Lou.
Like maybe in the most affluent neighborhoods, and I say neighborhoods, not towns or cities, like it's 200K. But I mean, where I live in one of the most affluent neighborhoods in America, and it's nowhere near 200K as the median. So it's up there, man. And
Well,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that 1% we really need to focus on. It is 1% that has like 99% of our wealth, the country's money, all of the country's money. 1% has 99% of it. It's ridiculous. This is exactly what Bernie Sanders ran on in 2016, and it's scummy that it's come to that. Like as rich as our country is, all of the citizens are what make it rich. We are the affluence. We are. the income, and none of us have anything to show for it at this point, to the point where our farmers are about to lose their land to government officials who are going to put them out of business and then buy their land for pennies on the dollar so that they just have property. They're all real estate tycoons, every single one of them. This lines up with everything that they're doing. So like I'll never I'm going on a tangent here. I'll never understand why American citizens are okay with this. I'll never
Right.
understand why they believe people with money have their best interest at heart when all that they have done time and time again is prove that they just want more money. like
Oh,
like we have $35 billion, and we've gone $2 trillion in debt in the past 10 months. We have $35 billion that could bail out our farmers, but we gave $40 billion to Argentina. Like, it makes no sense, dude. We're slaves, every single one of us. You and me, we are slaves to the credit score that exists to hold us down to where we are.
If I can insert a quote real quick, and then I'm going to turn it to Lou, because I think Lou had something to say. But I'm going to paraphrase this quote from George Washington, and a lot of what Kevin just mentioned could have been avoided had we listened to the very first president of this country. As
Hmm.
George Washington was leaving office, he issued two very brilliantly pointed out warnings that the country should have listened to. Is one, state of foreign affairs. Two is that political institutions in this country over time would subvert the will of the people and the power in this country and take it for themselves and strip it from the people. And that is exactly where we are today, where the political institutions that we have created, the parties themselves are stripping power, like
Hmm.
you said, and it is taking away rights of the people. And it is not about creating a better America for the individual. It's about creating a better America for a party in general.
Hmm.
And that is where we really get into the scary side of things. Lou, take it away. I gotta go pee.
yeah, just throwing some more statistics kind of on the topic of, you know, kind of the corporate greed thing. SNAP benefits, obviously, with the government shutdown have been a big
Fuck.
thing. And so just looking it up, a lot of people will look at SNAP benefits as people who are just getting free food from the government, who aren't working. But the exact opposite of that is actually the case. In fact, 86% of SNAP recipients have some form of other income, have a job. So we're talking about 86% of these people who have to get government assistance or government subsidies. Uh, and the subsidies aren't these subsidies, let's make no mistake, are not subsidies for the people. The subsidies for the corporations. That's money that the corporations don't have to give their employees. So the
Exactly right.
government is stepping in to take care of money that should be spent by the corporations for the people who make them the
Hmm.
money that they're floating around in. And that's,
Yeah.
you almost expect that Scrooge McDuck moment, man, of like that CEO is just going to dive into the vault, full of coins and change.
Is it that CEO, or is it some tech billionaire? You know what I mean?
Oh, it's
Like,
I mean, all of them combined, they're all just
yeah, I'm
having
going to
a
ask
pool
you.
party of money.
I would like to ask you, just off the top of your head, what percentage of American citizens are living under the poverty level? What percentage would you think it is? And all of our viewers, I want you personally to think right now, in your mind, what percentage of Americans are under the poverty level? So Lou, what do you think it is? Just guessing.
Well, the problem with guessing is I was, just going
You
through
were just
some
looking at
stats here. So
it.
I do know that 45% of Americans make less than $75,000 a year.
Yeah, but that's
So
not poverty. That's not
that's
poverty
not
level.
poverty, right? Correct.
Mhm.
I know. I'm like right in that.
That's
You're
kind of
not,
middle class. Yeah, that's middle
yeah.
class. Yeah.
So, but
11.1% of American citizens, 36.8 million. And this is 2 years ago. The statistic I'm looking at right now. 2 years ago,
right,
11.1% of Americans were under the poverty level. Think about how many businesses have failed this year. We have 100,000 American citizens plus 100,000 plus out of jobs. obviously a bunch of states are suing the federal government right now because of all of the federal furloughs and layoffs. But all of those people are technically unemployed right now. They are in the poverty level. So not only has it like expanded this year, I mean that percentage has blown up. This is like I said, this is 2 years ago, man. Like they're hiding. This comes back to the transparency I was talking about earlier. They're hiding all of these. Every time a statistic comes up that goes against the current administration, whatever department of the government that founded that statistic is canceled.
Yeah.
Like they're just done away with, and all of those people are laid off. Like it makes. Hmm.
Well, you ready? Yeah, yeah, you ready for this great talking point that they give you? Well, just
Yeah,
stop buying Starbucks every day.
yeah, yeah. You don't need
You'll be all
avocado
right.
toast. Yeah, who needs
And
avocado
they say
toast?
that while I board my private jet,
Yeah, yeah, right.
to
I'm
take
I'm
me to a
spending.
meeting.
I know. So I'm in Southern California, and I recognize that things are more expensive here because we pay a shitload of federal taxes that supplement every fucking red state that is a welfare state. Sorry. But we pay a shitload of federal taxes, dude. I haven't paid less than $4.85 for a gallon of gas in like 3 years. You know, at the beginning of this year, it shot up to 5.25. I was paying $5.25 a gallon for gas. I remember as a kid, and this again is in South Carolina, one of the red welfare states I'm referring to. Um, I remember as a kid when there was an outrage that a gallon of gas cost more than a gallon of milk. And when that outrage happened, it was 75 cents a gallon of gas. People were mad that 75 cents a gallon of gas was more than a gallon of milk.
It's crazy that just in our lifetime, just in our lifetime,
Bro.
I remember so gas here on the East Coast, at least in the mid East Coast. I've already said that I'm in Virginia, so right now it's just a little bit under $3. That's just in the area that I'm in. Now, if you factor in Northern Virginia, then obviously it's going to be a little bit more expensive, and the average would be a little bit higher than that. So it's probably just a little bit above $3. But I remember just in my lifetime when I first got a car and was driving that people flipped out the first time that it crossed over like $1.15. And I remember like a line of cars at this one gas station who had the genius idea of, just being 5 cents cheaper. And people were like rushing to it. And it was like, oh, this is the beginning. I mean, but think about what that, if somebody right now was like, for 2 hours, I'm gonna make gas $1 a gallon. They'd be flooded for
They made so
Sheesh.
mutte money too. And then once they raised the prices, people were still coming,
right. They're already
Yeah.
in line. They've already been waiting.
I mean
So
that I could say that is deception, and a lot of people will disagree with me. And I sort of agree with them that it is not deception, it is capitalism. It's fuck the consumer. We're going to charge you what we can charge you. We don't care about what it actually costs. We're going to charge you what we can, you
right,
know? Whether it costs us $5, we're going to charge you 10. If it costs us $5 and you can't get us anywhere else, we're going to charge you 15. And that's just the way it is. That's the society we live in. That's the economy we live in. And it really bewilders me when people start again bringing up Mamdani because he's so prevalent in social media right now, and in the news when he talks about bringing up like soup kitchens and like just public resources that existed for the people who are voting against it right now. It existed for them up and through the 80s. Up until the late 80s, we didn't have credit scores. They had social services. In 1988, the population of Earth was half of what it is today. The competition wasn't there. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't make sense. So the people who are voting today are voting with the mindset of the 1980s, and that shit doesn't exist anymore. That as a millennial, as a 41-year-old who was born in March of 1984, I was born for fighting conservative wars. I fought in 3 wars on three continents. You know what I'm saying? And with 100% volunteer force, we were bred for this, man. Like these people, they're so fucking selfish with everything they do. And that's why the Constitution is so important because they are abusing it time and time again. You know, as a constitutionalist, I see them violating our rights and no one's fucking doing anything about it. Gavin Newsom, for example, I've always disliked Gavin Newsom. I'm against establishment Democrats for my own reasons. Um, I never really liked him, but he's the only one fucking standing up for us right now. You know, he's the only one standing up for anyone. There are a couple other, you know, Jasmine Crockett and, you know, AOC, she's doing her job. But as far as our Congress people go, man, they don't give a fuck about us. And it comes back to what I said earlier. We all have a price.
Well, you go to that point. I think about one of North Carolina's congresswomen who I can't remember exactly what happened. It was early in the spring with a bill that had been passed that she voted for that her constituents had a problem with. And the concept of voting in this your Congress representative, you can approach them, write them, call them, and give them your complaints. Well, she was supposed to attend town hall meetings to defend her reasoning for this, and she refused to.
Mhm.
She was not willing to answer emails. She was not willing to talk to her constituents. And, if that doesn't tell you where the average congressman or woman is realistically, then you're not paying very close attention to the American political sphere. And that is the trend that we are heading into. And, I was going to ask this question earlier to both of you about the average American voter. And for those out there, I'm not trying to take away what is given to Americans by no means, but how many of our voters are actually educated in who they're voting for? Not just I know the Democratic and Republican Party, but how many of them are actually educated on what their politicians actually stand for, what they're actually going to do? Lou.
Yeah.
I'll take this. Just to answer that question, just look at the numbers of the primary elections of how many people actually show up for those.
Hmm.
Should look at how many people show up for a presidential election versus if it's just their state senator on the docket, or if it's just a state delegate that's up for reelection, or a mayor or a city council. Like I just I I can't sit here and say that I know everything about every candidate, but I try. I try to look up all of their different things. I try not to look at it through Democrat and Republican lines. I've voted for Democrats. I've voted for Republicans. I've voted for Democrats and Republicans on the same exact ballot recently. And some of them I regret because I didn't look fully into their record. I might have just looked at what they did in the past and
Yep.
assume that their character was what I thought it was. But anyways, I think that on average, I would say that I'm in there, maybe slightly above that. I'll actually do a little bit of research and look into it and not just go down party lines. I think most people are just going down, looking for R&D, and then just going that route because it's not necessarily that we're so divided, but politics has become a sport. You know, I don't know if you can gamble on
Well,
elections yet,
you can
but
go, you can gamble on anything.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure.
You
You
could
know,
gamble on how many times we're going to say fuck in this episode, and somebody could
mhm,
get money off of that.
right? And
there's an
and
app for it.
the crazy
Yeah.
thing for me is, I'll see on my social media when somebody says we won. Like when somebody gets elected, and I'm like, did you campaign for them? Did you
Hmm.
go? Were you on the campaign? What are you benefiting from this campaign other than you think that this person, stands up for your morals or your belief system? Um, and then, so if they won, if the other candidate won, does that mean you lost?
Mm.
Like, what does this mean? Like, I don't know. I might just be talking in circles there, but
Oh, no, I don't
No,
think
no,
so. I mean,
no, no,
and
no, not at all.
I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. I'll drop it in the chat. It's a website called iSide With, and I've been using this. And if anybody out there, either both of you, um, or a viewer is like, well, this website actually skews a lot of data, but I've actually really enjoyed it, and I've been using this in the last 9 years of teaching. Long story short, what this website does, if you are like an undecided voter, it will give you a list based on your state on all questions related to like state social issues that are going to come up with your candidates and like statements made by federal candidates right now. It's like 50 questions. It can be 100 if you want to go that route. And it will say, based on your results, this is the candidate you align the most with on how you answered this. This is the party you identify with the most. In my 9 years of showing this to my civics and my AP government students, the majority of my students do not get the Democratic or Republican Party. They get another third party in America that actually really pertains to their votes. And when people actually break it down, there are excellent third parties in this country. However, why?
Absolutely.
Why don't they have a voice? Well, and it's like my kids, when they were like, Mr. Woodard, how come we haven't heard of these parties? Why are they not on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC? And I'm like, you just kind of answered that question yourself without
Mhm.
realizing it. Is that why would these news media platforms that are paid for by these parties, supported by these parties, show third parties that perhaps people really have more of a liking and a connection to? Why you threaten that possibility of the Democrats or Republicans losing power to third parties that could actually maybe bring real change? I hope they bring real change.
I'll put in two really short points, and then we need to move on to our next topic for time's sake. But my opinion as far as to answer your earlier question, I think you should compare a map of votes versus a map of literacy.
Ooh.
If I was looking at it earlier today, a map of literacy in by county of the United States, you're gonna be blown the fuck away. It's really disappointing. It
Take this for what you will. It's from the Barbara Bush Foundation. Once again, just a quick Google. But this is showing literacy of adults by counties across the globe. And the darker blue means the more, um, oh, the darker blue means the lack of literacy across the United States or in that county. Like Starr County, Texas, 69% of adults like basic literacy skills. That is 7 out of every 10, essentially, there. That is mind-boggling. And it's like, I think of my state and where I grew up in Western North Carolina. And, I'm actually kind of shocked by the data. Now, I don't know truly how accurate this is. But, if this map is an indicator, regardless of the fact with a lot of the dark blue that we see here and just some of the darker shades of blue, in many ways, it's too much still. You'd think and want to hope that you wouldn't have a lack of literacy beyond 10%. But we do, though. And Kevin and the votes are evident of that. Having conversations are evident of that, where, and Lou, this firsthand, just with, the fact you guys have been alive 10 years longer than I have, essentially. You've experienced and had these conversations more. But when I ask my students or people in general, why do you vote the way that you vote? And when they say, well, it's because of religion, it's because of how I was raised, or because it's just what I saw on TV, I hear that more times than I should. I rarely, rarely hear, oh, well, it's because I've educated myself on X, Y, and Z, and this is what has led me to make that decision. And that's the sad reality that I think we are facing in the United States, is that this concept of time and longevity, why waste the time to educate myself when I can watch TV, when I can watch social media to tell me how I should do it? Because that takes time out of my day.
Right. I mean, yeah, if you're voting for just those sort of surface level topics that you're talking about, my religion, my beliefs, or, well, my parents were, and again, this kind of goes on the sort of sports comparison, right? Of like, oh, well, my parents were Republicans, so I'm Republicans, or my parents were Democrats, so I'm Democrats. I mean, that's like me saying like, oh, I'm a Washington Commanders fan because my dad was a Commanders fan, you know? Like, can we get out of that sort of like, again, that sports um, uh, politic thing, where it's my team versus your team, as opposed to, hey, let's get some people in there that, know what the F they're doing, are smarter than us, That's one of the biggest things. Like when I see, there's one thing that Barack Obama had said that was very interesting to me when he was talking about the way people feel about maybe like elites and like where they kind of stand on it. And he said, like, when you spend a certain amount of time in a room with some of the people at this level, like on top, you quickly realize that you are just as smart, if not smarter, than everyone in the room a lot of times. And I don't think he was saying that in his way. He was saying like the American people are smarter than we give ourselves credit for, and that the politicians give us credit for. And many of these politicians, yes, they're supposed to be representative of the populations that they serve. And I hope not, because a lot of them are dumb as hell, and you see it. And it's like, and I'm not talking one again on one side or another. We are fully ripping on everybody here. So if you're watching this and you think like, oh well, they're just going after the Republicans or whatever.
Mm-mm.
We're
Nah,
bipartisan.
no,
Take them both.
I'm trying not to name names, but like, there's a lot of dum dums on both sides, and that just got there, and it can be, some people just have the gift of gab and can talk their way in a room, and a lot of time that's the biggest thing, but couldn't tell you any sort of constitutional law, couldn't tell you, don't know the basic things
They
that
don't
you're
know the three
talking
branches
about.
of government. Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, if you're going into a job, that should be the very least thing that is about the quote unquote company that you're going to be working for and the makeup of it.
Amen.
And yeah, so I just think that, um, yeah, kind of tying this all back up because I know we need to jump into the other topic of like, um, I think one of the biggest threats to the Constitution is money in politics, and that's going to be my sort of wrap up on my end of this conversation. Is that I think that getting money out of politics and bringing it back to that sort of just raw level of I'm voting for candidates based on what they're promising that they're going to do for me, and then if they don't follow through on those promises, guess what, buddy? You're out.
So I'm
I'll
gonna
find
bring up
somebody
a
else
question
who will.
that I think this question would be a great podcast episode, and Kevin and Lou, I know you're going to jump on it. A great podcast for us to continue what we're talking about right now is the biggest threat to the Constitution and American democracy, money, elite democracy, elitism, or is it the uneducated American voter?
Let's do an entire episode on this. So our next episode is going to be the birthday episode, and then after that, I have a topic, but the one after that will be exactly what you're talking about right now. That's a perfect episode, man. It absolutely is. So yeah, that'll be great. I'll go ahead and write that up over the next couple days. Um, if you guys are okay to go ahead and move on,
Do it.
I'm not going to answer your question because I really want to save what I have to say, which is pretty fucking passionate.
Ooh.
I'm gonna go. You know me, man. I go on some tangents and I say some pretty crazy shit sometimes, but I think all of it's pretty rational. In my eyes, I'm the smartest person I know. So it all makes sense to me. Anyway, so if you guys are okay with it, I would like to move on to our next topic, which is journalism. Um, wow. With everything going on right now from Caroline Levitt with the big crucifix, you got to have that if you're going to be working with the press. Um, Lou, my first question is perfectly geared toward you because of your degree, because of your MOS within the Marine Corps, your job within the Marine Corps, your experience. I would love to know how you define ethical journalism and what would you say are its like core principles?
Yeah. So, what is ethical journalism? Um, I I think ethical journalism at its core is non-commentary, non-editorial writing that writing or storytelling that doesn't try to skew an audience one way or another, but allows the audience to come up with their own conclusions, right? So if I'm interviewing, um, if I'm talking about a story about a particular bill or something like that that's up on the table, if I only interview Republicans, that's one-sided journalism, right? Because I'm only giving their side of the story, and therefore I'm skewing the audience that way. Um, I mean, obviously, if a liberal or Democrat read that story, I'm sure they would still feel it's like hate reading or like hate watching Fox News or something like that. But yeah, so and then on the other side, if I were to only interview Democrats on their viewpoints, I'm only giving one side of the story. And as the journalist, that's my responsibility. That's not theirs. They're gonna love it. They'll, oh yeah, only interview us. Shoot, we're the only side that makes sense. You're always gonna get that, right? And then I think that sort of the tenets of it and the components of sort of objective journalism is to never put yourself in the story, because you are just the storyteller. You're not in the story. You are the narrator of it. Um, and a lot of times people get that mixed up, and it becomes commentary or it becomes editorial. Those news shows that have, say a Bill O'Reilly or, you know, um,
Steve Bannon. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they are
Glenn Beck.
commentators.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a
They're
million of them.
commentators. They're taking the stories of the day and then they're giving their take on it, which is going to be obviously one-sided. Um, so I think it's important for people to understand the difference between commentary and objective journalism and editorialism. So at the Defense Information School, where we're all taught to be combat correspondents, we learn about journalism, photojournalism, and we also learn about ethics, right? Making sure that we are. I remember one story that I can tell. It was just naivety or naivete, where I said this journalist, this journalist learned the other day, blah blah blah, and my instructor was like, "Never ever do that. Don't ever put yourself in the story. You don't have an opinion. You don't have an opinion on the story. You are here to tell the story as it happened. And how can you do that when you weren't there? You find people that were there, and you get every person that you possibly can. You do all your due diligence to make sure that not only are you interviewing the right people that were there, but that they are being truthful. And how do you do that? Interview some more people who were there. Don't just, find one person and say like, okay, well, I'm just going to interview them and that's a wrap. And so that we get this one-sided story on what happened, because what you'll find out is there's another side of the story. Somebody was standing on the other side of the street and saw a different angle. Not to continuously go back to the sports analogy, but when you watch a replay, if there's a call in question, they show multiple angles, right? Multiple different viewpoints to get the full story. Because one person might see that as say we're in football, that's a first down. Oh, no, that camera angle shows that the guy was short of the line, so it wasn't a first down. So it's just getting different angles and different perspectives and combining them into one story that doesn't skew the audience one way or the other, but allows the audience to make up their own mind.
Well, and while Kevin's muted, I'll chime in here because Kevin, that's why I love this man.
Go for it. Go for it.
You
Yeah.
you just made what I do, Lou, make so much sense.
Hmm.
And my connection to what I'm doing is kind of journalism, where I'm interviewing a multitude of few Marine combat veterans, and I'm not letting one story dictate the entire war. And I believe that realistically, American citizens need to realize, why I'm saying this is that, if I just interviewed one Marine from Vietnam, one Marine from Iraq, and it was like, this is the Iraq War, this is the Vietnam War from one perspective, the bias that is associated there. And it applies to our American journalism in so many ways. When our journalists are only talking to one side, only showing one side of the story, where does the ethics really come into it? Where do we get this, grassroots journalism where you will find young journalists out there that are trying to catch a true story that is about current American politics? Why doesn't that make the big headlines? And we can go back into that later. Um, but for our aspiring journalists out there that will see this, and this is coming from somebody who has zero experience in it whatsoever, you know, do your job. Do your job the way that you were trained to do it, taught to do it, not for you, but for us, for me, as an informed American citizen that will get my opinion off of your story, that will possibly sway me. Rightfully do the research, do your homework. Take those multiple perspectives. You take Lou's story, my story, Kevin's story. Check it with other people that were there. That way we have a better journalistic view of America. And I can bring this point back in that I talked to Kevin about earlier this week about what I teach journalism in a class that I do. But it terrifies me where I see the narrative of journalism going in this country compared to what I was raised to believe journalism is.
Well, at that point, Zach, as a historian, what would you say are the more famous examples of when a government or a powerful institution has tried to suppress the press or through their freedom of expression, which is freedom of the press?
This is going to sound like beating the dead horse to many of you, but I don't care though. It's history. History is documented by fact. You can
Yeah.
research this, find it, fact check me. I do not care. Um, but I will in these conversations with Kevin and Lou in this podcast, I will always bring up Nazi Germany. I'm not saying that that's what we are, but that's the easiest connection that I can make because it is so well documented. Um, but in 1933, the Nazi government literally passed a law that checked who could be a journalist in Nazi Germany, what they could report on, how their stories could be framed, what their stories could show. And when you bring in the factor that the government can limit what journalistic agencies can appear at White House press reports, what journalistic agencies can appear at the Pentagon, what they can report on. You start tapping into not just freedom of speech, but freedom of press. What does that mean? If we're going to attempt to poke that bear, well, you can't take away my freedom of speech or press, but you can. What happens when it's not protected? What happens when no one is there to bat for you and no one is there to enforce your rights? And you look at this concept of propaganda. If the government control what stories are being pushed on television, social media, newspapers, online articles, they can control the narrative. And what we've talked about previously with American voters and Americans in general, we are easily swayed by what we see on media. You control
Mhm.
that narrative, you control the American voter, you control how they view a certain concept, you control what wars we support, you control what countries we're against, you can control our views on immigration, abortion, gun control, you name it, simply because you control the narrative. And that's the name of the game. Journalism is power, empowering to the people until government comes into control. And government can easily, as both of you know, manipulate that power because why give the people or why give people an ounce of this freedom, an ounce of this power to empower themselves, to go forth, to question, to persevere when government can control it and manipulate?
I mean, those are both excellent points, you guys. I really appreciate you both coming in on this. My next question would be to feed off of what you're both saying. What do you both feel? What do you each feel are the biggest threats to the freedom of press today? Um, and like how do you think a journalist, like an individual journalist, could combat them? Being kicked out of the White House, being told your mom as a response to a completely legitimate question. How could a journalist combat that? Like what can we do? What can freedom of press help us with? I mean, how can it help us in this specific situation?
I mean, first off, let's just say this. I don't give a damn what party they are. I don't care which president they represent. If your response to me is your mom, I'm from Portsmouth, Virginia. We'll get street on you real quick.
Yeah.
Not threatening or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, and that leads me to my point. Have some balls. Male balls, female balls. Have them. Stand up. You know, when you get a response like that, don't quit. Keep pushing. Like, no, that's not a significant enough answer. Why don't you? And if they keep talking you over, hey, okay. So what you're saying is you're refusing to comment on this. So
You're
you're obviously
refusing to do
hiding
your
something.
job.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
refusing to do your job as the public relations person for whatever organization that you're working for. Uh, and your mom, by the way. That would be my response back to that. Um, but no, yeah, that would be my recommendation. Short and simple. Have some nuts. Like stand up and say, no, that's not a significant enough answer. Uh,
I think a lot of the issue is like I was saying with the credit score, we're a slave to credibility in this sense. I think journalists are a slave to credibility, and that as soon as the White House says you are not credible, you can't come here anymore, that's it. Yeah, I mean that's where it stops. So I think that's what's stopping them from having balls and is the end of their career.
That's true.
While I mean, if you look at Kimmel and Colbert, though, it's like popular opinion has some sway still. It's not much, not near as much as it had maybe 5 years ago or even a year ago, when we were canceling rapists and fucking sexual people who were sexually assaulting people in Hollywood constantly. I mean, right and left, the whole Me Too movement and everything. Um, how do you feel with the freedom of press being under threat? And how do you think it can be combated? I mean, like with everything going on right now, like how can, aside from having balls, like what is there to keep them from just caring about their social credit at this point? Like uh, the credibility and their integrity, it doesn't produce any benefit at this point. So how do you feel about that? Especially as someone who has created propaganda for the United States government.
that's a good question. I think that's a question that many news outlets and news organizations are trying to figure out. And, like what I'm saying with just having balls, it's not just yelling back and doing all that, but have the guts to stand up for yourself. And it can be an attackful way. It should be an attackful way because, yeah, obviously you're going to get kicked out and asked not to come back or barred from it or restricted from coming back. And so there's certain ways to go about it. Uh, you know, the biggest thing is just not backing down from asking hard hitting questions. And you know what? If they don't want to answer, that's on them.
100%.
So guess what you do? You find somebody who will answer the question.
Damn right.
Or yeah, it's like for me, I always said this. Anytime I did an interview or did a story, I said, "Tell me what you think about this situation." Right? Tell me your story from your perspective. Like, don't tell me somebody else's sort of.
So for the next question, I would like to ask for Zach as a historian. Um, whew, this is a loaded question, so really
Ah,
prepare
shit.
yourself.
Here we
Yeah. So
go.
are there any historical lessons that modern journalists can learn from times when media was suppressed? And how can they exactly apply it? Like I mean, I obviously media is being suppressed right now, but in the past, as a historian, is how I'm asking you, what what key lessons can we pass on to journalists now? When they're sitting in the White House and Carolyn Levitt's saying your mom to them, how can they respond to that historically? Like, what would you say is your answer for it?
Well, you can take what I'm about to say and the lessons there. Look at any genocide that we recognize in the late 19th to 20th century, any of them, and all of them have censorship to some regard. Um, whether it is Nazi Germany, whether it is the Armenian genocide, whether it's Cambodia with the Khmer Rouge, whether it is going to be um, tapping into Belgian or German atrocities committed in the early 1900s,
Oh, the
and
Congo was terrible.
in the
Yeah.
Congo, absolutely.
Hmm.
And when you, as a journalist, and like you both have mentioned before, like I have briefly mentioned, you are there to write a story. One, and both of you can attest to this from both of your roles within the Marine Corps. A story or a photograph can make or break your career, realistically. It can elevate you to new highs. It can open doors that had never been there before. But also at the same time, stories or photographs can make or break the people, motivate them, or to show them what is really happening. And when you think about true journalism, at least in my view, that is what journalism is. It is you write a story that the people can connect to that shows them what is really happening. And so for journalists, realistically, with a threat to freedom of the press, you have to understand the consequences for what you're going to get into. That if you are willing to take that journalistic approach and do the true research, the investigating and the digging, you have to be prepared for the consequences. And hopefully we never get to the point that many of the genocides that have taken place did with a lot how they targeted journalists, arrests, secret tortures, killings that are framed as suicides or framed as someone was labeled as a part of this radical political party and they tried to flee in X, Y, and Z. But you have to value, do you value a story that can change and motivate the people, that can change the course of history for your nation and your country over your own life? And that is a personal decision that journalists will have to grasp with, going forward into history. But know that, your individual story could change the outcome of a nation, could bring news that could either enable authoritarian government to continue, or it could disable that. It could open the doors to people willing to question themselves, to take a step back from the moment of, this is what this story says. This is what I need to reflect on. On the flip side of that, though, how do you reach people that don't agree with you when it comes to your story? When you write a story that shows a certain political party or a political figure in the negative light in the wrong way, you've done your research, you've done the evidence checking, you've got the proof of it. What happens when people just say, "Nah, it's bullshit. That's not real." There's no proof of it. How do you combat that in our world when you can produce all the evidence in the world and people will still shrug their shoulders and say, it's not my issue. I have nothing attached to it. It didn't happen. It's fake news. It's AI. How do we go forth with that realistically?
I'm gonna say that
That's all on you, Lou.
I was just gonna say for me, I presented the story and how you took it is what you took it.
Mm.
And if you don't like what was being reported, I mean, that's on you. That's, it's for me, but I did my job to the best of my ability, and I wrote an objective story. And if that's what you came away with after all that presentation and all that, man, you gotta go back to school, dude. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. Like, stop drinking the Kool-Aid of whatever thing that's going on, because you're always going to have, you can't possibly write a story, send it out to the public, and then have every single person be like, oh, that's a Nobel prize right there. That's a Pulitzer, or you know what I mean, not Nobel, but that's a Pulitzer, and you're just not going to have everybody always agree with you. It's just like being a cook in a restaurant, right? You're not going to get everyone's taste buds the same way. I mean, trash is trash. Don't get me wrong, but you're never going to please everybody, and you're never
Right.
going to get everybody on your side. The biggest thing that you can do is hold your head up high that you did everything that you could to present the story and to let the viewer come to their own conclusions. I think getting in the way of that or trying to like sway that ends up you start to like get into a little bit of a slippery slope of like, okay, so am I going to start skewing so hard and to one side to try to convince these clowns over here that think everything's a damn conspiracy. Am I going to try to convince all them by skewing so far the other side that I've lost my journalistic integrity? No, let them be dumb. Let
Well,
them
Mm.
Will, you
that's my viewpoint on it. I don't know if other journalists would have that same viewpoint. But my biggest thing is you're not going to please everybody. So
You bring up a
fuck
great
them.
point of your own integrity. And it's what I challenge my students to as, like realistically, all of us are going to have a chance to be a part of history someday, big or small, whether we realize it or not. And I always tell my students, how do you want to be remembered? Do you want to be remembered as being on the right side of history, not as you view it now, but how it's viewed by historians and others later down the road? Or do you want to take that chance of being viewed on the wrong side of history, where you enabled a negative event to happen that hurt hundreds, maybe even one person, or realistically millions of other people? And I think that goes for journalists out there. How do you want to be remembered? Because once you publish a story, unless something happens, unfortunately, to a World Wide Web, it is out there for us to see. Because I pay for Ancestry to do a lot of my Marine Corps research with like muster rolls and files, I'm able to get access to, I think it's like oldnewspapers.com, and any newspaper that's ever been scanned, I can find it up there, well into the 1800s, and these different articles that have been written. And, if something like this exists 100 years down the road from now, and you're a journalist right now writing about political satire, political notion, political change in this country, realistically, what side of history do you want to be on? How do you want people to look at you as a great example, as a journalist who did things that as they were supposed to, or as an example where you drank too much of the Kool-Aid, to where you bought
Yeah.
into this concept of you've sacrificed your integrity for, like you mentioned there, Lou, morality and integrity versus perhaps the benefits that you could get at the time. And, that's a decision that all of us have to make individually when the time comes.
Yeah. So to kind of pick up off that and somewhat wind down with these questions, I have one to kind of pick up off of that. It's within the past however many years in the United States. What examples do you have of where journalistic integrity has directly impacted like the course of history or national policy? Like when have they failed? When have they succeeded? Like do you have like key examples in your mind that you think on or
One of the biggest things that I think the American media failed at was reporting enough on the Iraq and Afghanistan wars.
Mm.
When things first started popping off and everything's going on, um, they were over there and they were over there the whole time. I'm not taking anything away from them, but we're getting pushed, from front page to fifth, sixth, maybe back page at certain points over time, and that's just maybe just saturation of like, oh, we're just going to talk about the war over and over again. Hey, well, it's still going on, right? You still have young Americans going over there and dying and giving their lives to the country, and it's an afterthought. Like it's not front page news. It's not something that we should be talking about. That we're, let's say in 2006. Where's the front page of like, are we still in Iraq? Like, what is going on? Like, why, what it was, are we going to wrap this thing up pretty soon? It just pissed me off when I was in, and it pissed a lot of people off. I remember in Iraq of like, man, the people don't even know we're over here.
Yeah.
People like a average American doesn't know what this is going on because the civilian media has been quiet on it, or because it's been pushed to, a little blurb. And the only thing that anybody ever finds out is when 54 Marines get blown up in an AAV, you know, or, you know, and another thing is this is like, it got to a point of like, how many casualties do you need for us to be a prominent story in your news cycle? You know what I mean? Is it one? Is it 50? You know,
How many
that's
of you and me need to die? Yeah.
right for the American media to give a damn. And I think they
Yeah.
really fell short on their obligation to the American people including the servicemen and women who were over there giving their lives and giving their blood, sweat, and tears and sanity to this cause that ended up being bullshit to begin with. And we went, what, 8 years in Iraq, you know, and there were people that didn't even know we were still over there.
Yeah.
Yep.
How is that possible?
Well, there were
It's
Iraqi
possible.
and in Afghanistan, they thought we were still the Russians.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it's possible because you have a press corps that just doesn't give a shit anymore, or it's just not newsworthy anymore. Well, it's only not newsworthy because you're not writing the stories that make it newsworthy.
Mm,
That's it, plain and simple. If you wrote better stories and if you covered the actual events that were happening, it's very much newsworthy.
yeah.
It is very much newsworthy. And, and I don't want to say shame on all of them back then. They're working for a company just like everybody else. There's plenty of them that probably wrote stories that should have been on the front page. And then their fucking editor comes along and says, no, let's post fucking, who's dating who in fucking Hollywood up front. They just broke
Yeah.
up. Did you know that?
Hey, I will point out that on the flip side of that, there were some times where they shared too much. Geraldo giving out OPSEC,
Well, that's true, man.
they picked and choose. I mean, they were picking and choosing when they were when they were going to be thorough and like have integrity with their reports. But yeah,
Right.
I really appreciate that answer, man. That's really
And
solid. And no,
And I'll wrap it up to really answer the question, and that's where I think where if they had been reporting on what was going on more, there might have been more of a public outcry to get us
yeah.
the fuck out of there.
Well, they learned from Vietnam.
Yep, they
Right.
did. And
Yeah.
you when I had time to think about it, Kevin, to your question, and I know it's not recent, but that's the first thing that came to my mind is Vietnam.
Yeah.
When you think about bad journalism, you think about My Lai, which is a does need a story that needs to be told
Hmm.
properly and respectfully. But when it comes to bad journalism, the Miley narrative then spread out to, well, if this was one incident, this must be all American servicemen in Vietnam that they were participating in the massacre of villages. And terrible. Terrible accidents did indeed happen where people did make mistakes. And there were crimes that 100% happened during the Vietnam War that happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. However, those are the minority. Okay, we are talking, it is not the overall narrative for the average serviceman's experience over there, but that's where bad journalism comes into play. And, when you think about journalism, what gives people attention in the United States? Where does, as a civilian, where does my views go to? Does it go to positive news media? Does it go to negative news media? What's going to garner my attention? And it's the negativity. We feed
Hmm.
off of that, whether it's reading it in a newspaper, whether it's reading it in a magazine, seeing it on TV or TikTok. Negativity has been the grass there, the morbid reality of it, the morbid curiosity. And sadly, I think that that goes to the point that with journalism, a lot of it will continue to go down this
Yeah.
negative path because it's all about views. It's all about money. The more people that click that link, the more people that watch this broadcast are going to be the more dollars that go into our pocket. We need to make this be something that garners the attention of the public and, showing the positive side or showing the true reality of U.S. soldiers' perspectives in Iraq and what is really happening is it going to get us the attention that we want when we're thinking about Vietnam or when we're thinking about current relations and foreign affairs there? And I think that's where we really have to get into it. When does journalism and the news media shift to showing real news? It's not positive or negative. It's just real, true stories that are currently going on in our daily lives.
With both of your points are absolutely valid. I'll point out that, I've told my stories many times over the years. It's been 20 years since I was in Iraq. Well, since, I saw a lot of combat in Iraq. I've told stories and people don't believe me because of journalistic integrity. Well, they would have reported that, or no, they said something else entirely happened, or well, they just, left that whole part out, to what Lou was saying about they didn't even realize we were fucking there. My parents knew, past that, I don't feel like anybody gave a rat's ass. Maybe in the first year, maybe in the second year, but after that point, the media had successfully dehumanized us. We were numbers, we were statistics, and that's how they reported us. I think that anytime I tell my stories now, if I don't tell it in a very pragmatic and statistical way, no one fucking believes a thing I say. Like it's just it comes out as nonsense to them because of this lack of journalistic integrity that happened during the Iraq War. It's really bothersome, and man, it's hurt me over the years because I will be telling the honest truth, and people just straight up will not believe me. I've told the truth to other Marines who weren't there, who enlisted afterward, and they don't believe me. Like I'm like, hey, I was in Haiti and I didn't have any sappy plates, and they're like, okay, like as simple as that is, that sounds stupid, but the journalistic integrity and the lack thereof just really screws up our credibility as Marines, as soldiers, as service members. When we try to tell our story or when we try to influence people to think before they subscribe to all this shit. Recently, this was probably 4 or 5 months ago, before I deactivated my social media. Um, they were talking about invading. I'm not going to go into detail because I'll go on some tangent, but they were talking about invading another country. And my point was, hey, I made a Facebook post saying, hey, if you support this, send your kids. Don't send the poor kids, send your children. Make sure your kids enlist because your kids should be the ones fighting your battles that you support, right? You know, that's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And a lot of it is the journalistic integrity that comes down. These people will never know the truth, unless they go there themselves. And they're not going to go there themselves unless they're born poor to die in the military. And that's me. I was born to like a Scot-Irish family in South Carolina. I was a second born son. I'm not the inheritance. Yeah, I mean, I'm not getting the inheritance. I'm meant to go die in some fucking war. And that's just the reality of being born lower middle class. It's just how we're meant to live because that journalistic integrity doesn't exist for us. It exists for the elites. It exists for the people in power. It exists and has always existed to keep money and our finances centralized within our government. That's the plain and simple truth. And I hate to I kind of go on a radicalist tangent there, but it's how I feel. And I feel like when I say that, there's so many of our viewers who might see this and will disagree with me based off of what they've seen in media, what they've read on Facebook, what they've read on Instagram, what all of this lack of journalistic integrity has bred over these past however many years. I want to say 20 something years, but it's been way longer than, I mean, it's been 60 something years, 70 something years, 80 something years. I would say at least since Korea, at least in World War II, when they were doing it, it was somewhat justified. Since then, man, it's just been bending media to the rich's will. And we have paid the price for it. Those of us born below a certain tax bracket, it's always going to be us and it always will be us. And I hate to like kind of in my thoughts on such a downer point, but it's the truth. And I hope a lot of people that see this really take it into account. Like I said earlier, those that are going into the military, they need to know what they're getting into. They need to know what war is. It's not like, hey, this isn't Call of Duty, this is real. It's like, hey, there's a lot of implications to this. There's a lot of meaning to this. There's a lot of reason to this. And if you're not connected to any of that, you're just wasting your fucking time. You're wasting your fucking life.
Amen to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say definitely on a positive note, there are people out there, there are journalists out there still. Like there are good journalists with integrity still
Yep.
out there. Um, the problem is most of them are having to go freelance now.
They're
They can't,
suppressed. Yeah.
can't, yeah, they can't work for these companies because these media companies have interest too. We talked about early on in the episode of politicians being bought out. I mean, look at just Just look at the stories that they tell, and then look at the advertisement that comes afterwards. If you're watching, say, like a news program, you know,
Yeah.
if we're talking about like the rise of, say, diabetes in the United States, or type 2 diabetes in the United States, and then the very next advertisement that you see that pops up is about some sort of insulin pill that they've got now on the market that some pharma company's selling. There's a reason those two things lined up, right?
Or they're pushing toward old people, and then the
Right.
Viagra commercial comes. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same shit. Yeah,
Yeah.
same
Uh,
shit.
and I think it's on all of us, though, to challenge our critical thinking skills. And if you don't have critical thinking skills, you know, go and get some, because it's time. Like, we're all just kind of being trampled over down here. We're trampling on ourselves. We're trampling over each other. Uh, for what? To help out some billionaires get richer?
Hmm.
If they posted a story, guess what? That had some salacious headline, like you talked about, Zach. Like, negative news is always going to take over, or trump. Uh, yeah, uh, positive news, and that's just a fact of it. And a lot of these media companies are just simply advertising companies. Like, we live in an attention economy. Every platform, every app that you have wants you on that app as long as they can possibly get you up there. So if you engage, and it's also, we get what we want, right? We have this buffet of information, this buffet of places that we could put our time and effort and attention to, and we feed ourselves what we want, right? So if we're always interacting with these negative things, these negative stories, these negative posts, or whatever it might be, guess what's going to keep getting fed? Because they
Yeah,
want you to stay on the app.
Yep.
We're going to keep getting that negative stuff. So this is where I'm saying the critical thinking part has to come in to play for each one of us as individuals, is to recognize, holy shit, man, I really am getting fed like a bunch of bullshit. And if it
yeah,
comes down to it, delete the fucking app. Get the fuck out of there. Like, get your mental health straight. Get the fuck out of the goddamn echo chamber, and you'll be better off. I've had to do that many a times, just shut down the shit. Even if it's just deleting the app off my phone. I find myself only going on, say that platform maybe once every month, maybe, at that point, if I get it out of the little computer that's in my pocket. But yeah, we're being fed what we want to be fed.
yeah.
And a lot of times that's not necessarily all on the journalists' fault. It's on our
Exactly.
fault. It's on us too. Like,
You
that's
know,
the thing.
I'm going to read a quote right now, and to kind of wrap this topic up, I would like to read this quote from Nietzsche. And if you stare, or if you gaze into the abyss long enough, the the abyss will gaze back at you. If you focus on the dark long enough, you will become the dark. The dark
Amen.
will take over you. I don't think enough people realize that no one focuses on that. If you only look at the dark, then you become the dark. The dark will take over you, and you're never going to be what you were before. And what they were before was probably like a journalist with integrity. So, I really appreciate you guys. You both had really profound answers for all of this. This was such a great topic. I feel like, as far as constitutionalism and journalism, you guys really knocked it out of the park. So to kind of wrap this up, that was constitutionalism and journalism. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And the next topic of the next episode will be the Marine Corps birthday. But after that, we will have a great episode on Antifa and ICE, what they are, what they have become, what they will be, and how they are implemented. And I'm really looking forward to doing that episode. I think it's going to be really profound, and we're going to come up with some really great points. So, with that said, this is the end of our inaugural episode, and I hope everyone really enjoyed it as much as I did, because I
Oh
really
yeah.
love this. Yeah. So,
I have a
thank you very
profound
much.
question to end us out though. Because
I'll go for it.
this is goats and cookies, but we've also mentioned if we go back to the original photograph, no weed, no whiskey, just goats and cookies. So to take us home, all right, what are we? Who's the weed? Who's the goat? Who's the whiskey? Who's the cookie of the three of us?
Well, I was the weed, but I quit smoking weed recently. So I would say I'm definitely some whiskey, but more vodka. I just finished this handle during our episode. So I'm a vodka. Which in Iraq would be whiskey. Question answered.
Here's the goat.
He's the goat. Well, by default, I'll be the cookie. That's beautiful. That was an excellent. That was great, Lou. You made the day right there, man. I can't beat that ever.
Yeah,
I
that
mean,
should be
we
your
should just
selfie.
our interviews like this. I mean, this would
Yeah.
be anonymity all the way.
I can hear
Oh,
you too.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, this guy, this mask has some good range here. I can like talk through the nose.
Yeah.
can you give us a real good goat impression real quick?
I can't. Are you asking
Yeah,
him?
he's better at that.
So you got to lift the back of your tongue to the top, to the roof of your mouth, like that. So that
Ow.
noise, that you got to do the and
Mm.
then you add like a bounce to it. So so once you get that then you push as hard as you fucking can, and that's the goat noise I made in Iraq all the time. It was because they scream like people. They sound like if you hear a goat scream before they would slaughter it, like which I heard pretty often in Iraq, it screams and you can hear it from a half mile away, and it sounds like, I kid you not, a baby screaming sometimes. And you're like, what's happening? And you turn a corner and there's this goat hanging there upside down dying. And it's just like, oh, okay, that's okay. That's much better than I thought it was. So I can't do a goat scream near as well as a baby could.
Yeah. How about
Fucking
this? This
beautiful.
I don't think yields for a sound like that. So I'll say yeah.